The first rays of dawn slipped through the thin curtains of Ayesha's small bedroom, painting the walls in soft hues of gold and pink. The call of a distant crow blended with the gentle hum of the city waking up, rickshaws rattling over uneven roads, vendors setting up their stalls, and the warm aroma of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery. Ayesha stirred beneath her quilt, the familiar comfort of her modest home wrapping around her like a quiet promise. She stretched and whispered softly. "Another day, let's make it a good one." Sparkles, if you love emotional stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Her morning routine was simple yet meaningful. She swept the courtyard slowly, the broom tracing gentle circles as tiny dust clouds danced in the morning light. Along the edge, marigolds and jasmine flowers swayed softly, as if greeting her. She watered them carefully, the cool droplets slipping between her fingers, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. From the kitchen came the soft clatter of utensils and the familiar hum of her mother preparing breakfast. "Ayesha, come help me with the chapatis," her mother called warmly. Ayesha tied her hair back and stepped inside, joining her at the stove. These quiet moments, the shared laughter, the warmth of spices in the air, were the heartbeat of her home. Her younger brother, Imran, peeked into the kitchen with a playful grin. "Ayesha, save the last paratha for me," he teased. She chuckled. "Only if you finish your homework," she replied gently. Yellow heart stories like Ayesha's remind us of family, love, and sacrifice. If this moment touched you, please share this video with someone who loves heartfelt stories. After breakfast, Ayesha stepped onto the narrow street, greeting neighbors with kindness. "Salam, Auntie. How are you today?" she asked, her eyes bright. She helped an elderly neighbor lift a basket of vegetables, earning a grateful smile. Life here moved slowly, built on small acts of care, and Ayesha fit perfectly into its rhythm. Yet beneath this calm, something fragile lingered. This warmth, this peace, this simple happiness. It would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. Crescent moon, stay with us till the end to see how Ayesha's life changes forever. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this powerful story. Ayesha's days had always been predictable in their quiet comfort, until that Thursday afternoon when everything shifted. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, honey-colored shadows across the narrow streets of her neighborhood. The market buzzed with its usual energy, vendors calling out their prices, women bargaining over fresh vegetables, and the occasional honk of a rickshaw weaving through the chaos. Ayesha carried her small basket of groceries, the aroma of fresh coriander and tomatoes mixing with the earthy scent of dust and sunlight. She hummed softly to herself, thinking of the evening meal she would prepare for her family. Her mind wandered, recalling her mother's gentle scolding that morning, her younger brother Imran's laughter echoing as he chased a street cat, and the quiet pride in her father's eyes when he had praised her for helping the neighbors yesterday. Life had been steady, safe, and full of small joys, but that calm would soon shatter. As she approached the narrow alley that led home, a sudden commotion caught her attention. A crowd had gathered near a small stall, their voices raised in a mixture of shock and accusation. Ayesha felt a chill creep over her chest as she pushed through the crowd and saw the familiar figure of Rida, a neighbor and supposed friend, pointing directly at her. "You took it, didn't you?" Rida's voice cracked with anger, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "I saw you near the stall, Ayesha. Don't lie." Ayesha froze, her heart pounding. No, I didn't," she protested, her voice trembling. "I swear, I haven't touched anything." She held up her hands, almost instinctively, as if the gesture could ward off the accusation. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking uncertain, but Rida's eyes blazed with certainty. "Don't lie to me." "Everyone saw you," she shouted. Ayesha felt a sudden wave of disbelief and panic. Her mind raced. How could this happen? How could someone she trusted spread lies about her? Her basket slipped from her hands, tomatoes tumbling onto the dusty ground. She bent down quickly to gather them, but the whispers and stares had already begun. Her father appeared at the alley's entrance, his face tight with concern. "Ayesha, what happened?" he asked, rushing forward. I didn't do anything, Papa, she cried, her voice breaking. She's lying. But even as she spoke, the seed of doubt began to creep into her own mind. Everyone was looking at her. Even the familiar street seemed unfamiliar, harsh. The warm comfort of home and family felt fragile in that instant, and Ayesha realized, with a sinking feeling, that her life as she knew it had just changed forever. Little did she know, this was only the beginning, the first crack in her peaceful world, the moment that would spiral into disbelief, punishment, and betrayal. In the dark. Why doesn't anyone believe me? With every explanation ignored and every truth twisted, something inside me began to break. The more I spoke, the less they listened. And slowly, painfully, I realized that my words were no longer enough. The silence that followed would hurt even more than the accusations. I spoke until my throat burned, but every word felt like it fell to the floor before it reached anyone's heart. That evening, our living room felt smaller than ever. The ceiling fan spun slowly above us, its dull hum pressing into my head. My mother sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes shifting between me and my father. I stood in front of them, my palms damp, my heartbeat loud in my ears. I didn't take anything, I said again, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. I was only passing by. You know me. I would never do that. My father sighed, rubbing his forehead. Ayesha, he said quietly, people are talking. Rita is sure. The shopkeeper is angry. We can't ignore this. His words felt heavier than anger, worse than shouting. They felt like doubt. The next day, I was called to the office. The walls were bare, the air stale, the authority figure behind the desk barely looked up at me. Papers rustled. A pen tapped impatiently. So, he said, you were seen near the stall. And the money went missing right after. I was there, yes, I replied quickly, leaning forward. But so were many others. Please, check again. Ask anyone. I swear I'm innocent. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. People don't accuse without reason, he said. You should have been more careful. Careful. As if care could stop lies. Outside, the city felt louder than before. Every passing face seemed to carry judgment. Friends I once laughed with now avoided my eyes. One of them finally spoke as we stood near the old banyan tree. Why didn't you just admit it, she whispered. It would have ended already. I stared at her, my chest tightening. Admit what? I asked. Something I didn't do? She looked away. Back at home, I cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear. I replayed every moment in my head, every step, every word, every breath I took that day, searching for a mistake that wasn't there. I told the truth, I whispered to myself. In the dark. Why doesn't anyone believe me? With every explanation ignored and every truth twisted, something inside me began to break. The more I spoke, the less they listened. And slowly, painfully, I realized that my words were no longer enough. The silence that followed would hurt even more than the accusations. The next morning, the sun rose over the city, indifferent to the turmoil in my heart. Ayesha walked to the school gates, her bag feeling heavier than usual, each step like trudging through wet sand. Whispers followed her as she entered, the low hum of gossip, the pointed glances, the snickers barely disguised. Even the walls seemed to lean in, pressing her against the cold, unyielding truth. She was alone. She was called into the office, the same one that had felt suffocating yesterday. This time, the authority figure didn't even glance at her pleadings. The papers on his desk were stacked neatly, impersonal, as though they were waiting for her downfall. Ayesha, he said, his voice clipped, sharp as a blade, you will be suspended for 3 days. And I expect a formal apology in writing, acknowledging the incident. But I didn't, Ayesha started, her voice barely above a whisper. You heard me, he interrupted, tapping a pen on the desk. This is not negotiable. The evidence and witness statements are clear. Now, go. Her heart sank. The word suspension echoed in her mind like a tolling bell, each beat heavier than the last. She turned to leave, and in the hallway, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, the smirks, the silent judgment, the whispers that trailed after her like a shadow. "Did you do it, Ayesha?" someone muttered, their voice carrying just enough for her to hear. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, but didn't respond. Words were useless here. Outside, the courtyard seemed colder, emptier. Even the sunlight that had once warmed her skin now felt distant, almost mocking. She sat under the neem tree, watching the breeze stir the dry leaves, wishing she could disappear into the earth beneath her. The unfairness of it all gnawed at her. She had told the truth, yet punishment came faster than understanding. Later that evening, Rita passed by with a smug expression, whispering something to a group of students who laughed quietly. Ayesha's chest tightened, the sting of betrayal sharp and unrelenting. "How can someone I trusted," she murmured to herself, the words dying on her lips. By the time she reached home, her father's concerned eyes met hers, but even he seemed powerless, caught between social pressure and disbelief. Her mother held her hand, a silent comfort, yet even that could not erase the weight pressing down on her young shoulders. That night, lying awake beneath the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, Ayesha felt the bitter truth settle deep in her bones. Innocence alone was not enough. And as the darkness enveloped her room, she realized that this punishment, so undeserved, so cruel, was only the beginning of the storm she would have to endure. Night had fallen over the city, and the streets outside were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a distant rickshaw or the soft bark of a stray dog. Ayesha sat by her bedroom window, the cool breeze brushing against her face, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden below. The moon cast a silver glow across her desk, highlighting the scattered papers, her bag still unopened from school, and the empty cup of tea she had forgotten in the evening's chaos. She traced the edge of the window pane with her finger, lost in thought. Did I really do something wrong? The question repeated itself in her mind like a stubborn echo. Every step she had taken that day, every word she had spoken, replayed in vivid detail. Her stomach churned, and a tight knot formed in her chest. She had always believed in doing the right thing, in honesty, in integrity, but now, that belief seemed fragile, almost foolish. "I didn't do anything. I didn't," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. The words sounded hollow, as if even saying them could not convince her anymore. Doubt had seeped in, soft and silent, eroding her confidence piece by piece. She stared out at the empty street, wishing for some sign that the world still made sense, that truth mattered. Her hands trembled as she clutched a notebook, the one where she had written reminders, small dreams, and daily thoughts. Flipping through the pages, she tried to ground herself in the reality she knew, her honesty, her hard work, her kindness. But even these memories felt shadowed, as if tinted by the accusations that had followed her all day. "What if I should have done something differently?" she muttered, almost afraid to finish the thought. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, pale, tired, eyes wide with uncertainty. The weight of everyone's judgment pressed against her like invisible chains. Yet beneath the fear, there was a small, stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. Ayesha took a deep breath, letting the night air fill her lungs, and whispered softly, "I can't control what others believe, but I can control who I am." It was a fragile mantra, but it was hers. In the quiet of the room, surrounded by shadows and silver moonlight, she felt a small, growing sense of resilience. The self-doubt had not vanished, but it had changed. It became a mirror, reflecting not failure, but the strength she would need. Tomorrow, she would have to face the world again, and while fear still lingered, a part of her knew that truth, even when ignored, could not be erased. And in that fragile, quiet moment, Ayesha realized that the hardest battle would not be with others, but with herself. Days passed like heavy clouds refusing to rain. Ayesha moved through them quietly, her head lowered, her steps careful, as if any wrong movement might invite another accusation. The city went on as usual, shops opened, children laughed in the streets, life refused to pause, but for her, time felt suspended. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the old buildings and painted the sky in shades of orange and gray, a knock echoed at the door. Ayesha's heart skipped. Visitors had become rare since the incident. When she opened it, she saw Samir, a quiet boy from the neighborhood who worked near the market. His eyes were restless, his hands clasped together as if holding on to courage. "Ayesha, can I talk to you?" he asked softly. She nodded and stepped aside. Inside, Samir hesitated before speaking, his voice low. "I was there that day," he finally said. "Near the stall. I saw who actually took the money." Ayesha's breath caught. You saw?" she whispered, afraid to believe him. He nodded slowly. "Yes. It wasn't you. I didn't say anything before because I was scared. But I can't stay quiet anymore." For the first time in days, something warm stirred in her chest, small, but real. Hope. The next morning, they stood together outside the office. The same walls, the same desk, but the air felt different. The authority figure listened as Samir spoke, his voice steadier now, describing exactly what he had seen. He pointed out details, timing, movements, faces, that could not be ignored. The man behind the desk frowned, flipping through papers, his certainty wavering. "This changes things," he said finally, his tone no longer sharp. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Samir lowered his gaze. "Fear," he admitted. Silence filled the room. Ayesha stood still, her hands folded, her heart pounding, but this time, it wasn't fear driving it. It was relief. Later, as she stepped outside, the city seemed different. The same streets, the same people, but the weight she carried felt lighter. The sky looked wider. The air easier to breathe. A neighbor approached her hesitantly. "Ayesha." "I'm sorry," she said. "We were wrong." Ayesha nodded, not trusting her voice yet. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't smiling widely. But as she walked home, the quiet confidence she thought she had lost began to return. She had waited. She had endured. And the truth, slow, patient, stubborn, had finally found its way to the surface. Yet she knew something important had changed forever. Being proven innocent did not erase the pain she had lived through. And as she crossed the familiar street toward her home, she understood that healing would be the final, and perhaps hardest, chapter of all. The morning air felt different, lighter, calmer, as Ayesha stepped outside her home. The street was the same narrow path she had walked her entire life, lined with familiar houses and quiet corners, yet something inside her had shifted. The neem tree at the end of the lane swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves whispering softly, as if acknowledging her resilience. She paused there, resting her hand against its rough bark, grounding herself. For days, anger had tried to take root inside her, anger at Rita, at the crowd, at the silence that had punished her more than any accusation. But standing there now, she realized how heavy anger felt. Heavier than the pain she had already carried. "I won't let this define me," she said quietly, her voice steady. Saying it out loud made it real. As she walked through the neighborhood, a few people greeted her with awkward smiles, others with regretful glances. Some whispered apologies. She listened, nodded, and moved on. Their approval no longer felt necessary. She had survived their judgment, she didn't need their validation. Later, alone in her room, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the small space where she had cried and questioned herself. She looked at her reflection, still the same face, but stronger eyes. "I know who I am," she whispered. "That's enough." Memories of the past weeks passed through her mind like distant echoes. The fear. The shame. The loneliness. But they no longer controlled her. She understood now that innocence does not always protect you from cruelty, and truth does not always speak loudly. Sometimes, it simply waits. She sat on the edge of her bed and closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "I choose peace," she said softly. "Not revenge. Not bitterness. Peace." Outside, children laughed as they ran past her window, life continuing as it always had. And for the first time since everything began, Ayesha felt ready to move forward with it. She knew scars would remain. Trust would take time to rebuild. But she also knew something important: her dignity was intact, and her strength had grown in the shadows. As the day unfolded, Ayesha stepped into it with quiet confidence, not as a victim of false accusations, but as someone who had faced injustice and emerged stronger. Her story wasn't about being punished while innocent anymore. It was about rising anyway.